Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carolyn if you are new here, and today I am filming my March wrap-up part 2. So I uploaded my part 1 a few weeks ago, and there's a bunch of good books in there that I really love, so I will leave that link below if you haven't seen it yet. So today I'll just be talking about the 5 books that I read in the second half of the month. I feel like I'm definitely kind of finding my stride with books, and definitely picking ones that are just kind of, I'm sure that I'll love, which is just a good feeling. I feel like I'm not wasting my time with books that are just not really for me. I feel like I did that a lot last year. So yeah, this past month was so many incredible books. So I will just start off with a bang, and that is The Overstory by Richard Powers. So of course this book has been everywhere. It was shortlisted for the Booker. It is much beloved. And this book is about trees, but it's a lot more than that. So kind of the first half of the book, we kind of go into a few different families, and then kind of from each family we follow one specific person following a bunch of generations, and then we kind of settle on one character that we follow for the duration of the book. And the first half of the book is really just about a family and kind of a tree that's central to their family, or sometimes kind of on the fringe of their family, but it's always there and it's kind of a mark of their family. And then the second half of the book really kind of kicks into full gear, and it is very much pushing environmental justice. I think Powers is completely adamant in this book, through his characters, through his writing, through the plot, fighting for environmental justice, which I think is just really refreshing to read. So I think with a book like this, when you're following so many perspectives, it is kind of natural to settle on a few or one that's your favorite. And for me, that was definitely Patty, I believe is her name, and she's the scientist, and I definitely preferred her sections to all the others. I think her sections, what I love so much about them, is it talks a lot about the science of trees and about the social network of trees, which I just found so interesting. And I think because this book has such a huge scope, from physical space to generation to individual, you can get a little bit bored sometimes. It felt like it was a little bit stagnant, but then it kind of kicked it up again. So I did really like this book. It didn't kind of knock it out of the park like I thought it would. I thought this would be like one of my all-time favorite books, but I still really loved it. And I think there are a few like visual moments in this book that I will just never forget. Of course, we're in like the redwoods, and we're in all these national parks, and we're like up in a tree house that's like hundreds of feet in the air. So I think the writing of this was super beautiful, and I think it's not just about environmental justice. That's like obviously the main theme of this book, but it's the characters are beautifully written. They're so deep, they're so complex. I just think that this book kind of ebbed and flowed for me. I didn't love all of it, but this does kind of feel like a treasure of a book. It is refreshing to read about something, and Powers really convinces the reader that what these characters are doing to fight for environmental justice is the best way to do it and is necessary. I would definitely recommend it, and I'm glad I finally read it. This was in my Tomes video. It was the smallest of the bunch. It's a little upwards of 500 pages, but I'm so glad I read it, and I definitely recommend it. It's really beautiful, and I think it is like a good springy summer book to read in those seasons. Okay, and then a book that broke a little piece of me. I am not someone who's super emotional. I've often been called like emotionally deficient. I'm not going to shed a tear very often, but this book stood out, and that is Never Let Me Go by Ishiguro. So of course this is one of like the most popular books out there, but I am very lucky because I've kind of managed to avoid any semblance of what this book was actually about, which is really awesome, because I think going into this book knowing next to nothing is kind of the best way to do it. I did talk about this book very briefly in the Bar in the Bookcase tag. So this does follow 3 young people, Kathy, Tommy, and Ruth, and they're friends, and they're at a it seems very prestigious and kind of secretive boarding school. And at the beginning of the book, it's just kind of like childhood banter, childhood drama, and then we do kind of quickly learn that kind of something odd is going on, and that the kids are told constantly that they're very special, they need to be protected, that they're just very special, and we kind of start to wonder, well, why is that? So that's all I'll say about the plot of the book, because again, you don't want to know anything going into this, but like I said in that other video, this book is heartbreaking, specifically because it does have that kind of childhood wonder and childhood innocence element that makes it all the more sad. But this book is also really beautiful, and it's kind of, the writing is almost very subtle and quiet, so it does kind of creep up on you. You're just kind of following them along, and all of a sudden you're like heartbroken and grief-stricken, and it's like, how did that happen? But wanted to read Clara in the Sun by Ishiguro, but I thought that before I spent like another $30 in the hardback, I would read this one, and now I'm sure that I want to continue with Ishiguro's work. This was beautiful. I get why everyone loves it. It was heartbreaking, and it's one that will definitely stick with me. It definitely like kind of ingrained itself in my mind. The writing is beautiful. The characters are really moving and seem really real and lovable, and you just kind of want the best for them. So this one was a killer. I would definitely recommend it. And then a book that is very different, and that is Burnt Sugar by Avni Doshi. So this is a debut novel, and it follows a mother-daughter pair. The mother is named Tara, the daughter is named Antara. A little bit confusing, but Tara, in her older age, is losing all of her memory, and she has dementia or Alzheimer's and can no longer care for herself. So Antara, her daughter, has to step in and care for her. And it becomes clear that Antara really resents her mother, and we kind of go back in time and learn why, and see how Antara was really neglected and not protected as a child. Tara was kind of a wild person and went off to an ashram and kind of joined like a cult-like movement and didn't protect her child. And this book is really, really heavy. Like there's no light, there's no joy in this book. So if you're going into that expecting a little bit of lightness, you're not going to find it. I do think this book kind of deals with, are they responsible for something that they no longer know? And are you still the same person that did these terrible things if you're kind of losing your memory? And who are you now? And can you be blamed for those actions? And Antara is really resentful of her mother. She's really, really angry, and rightfully so. I think like even the first line of this book, I mean, brutal. And that is, I would be lying if I said my mother's misery has never given me pleasure. So if that gives you any hint of how heavy this book is, I think I definitely preferred the latter half of the book when it kind of got into the cyclical nature of mother-daughter relationships and what's kind of embedded in us and what can we try to avoid but will just kind of creep up on us. This book is dark, it's heavy, it's disturbing. It says the word saliva on like every other page, so it's a little bit gross, but I would definitely keep my eye on this author, and I enjoyed it. And then a book that kind of has like similar themes, but I loved this. Like I liked Burnt Sugar, but I loved Hot Milk by Deborah Levy. So again, a mother-daughter pair. Sophia is a young anthropologist, and her mother has long been ailing from a very mysterious illness with her legs. She'll randomly go numb in her legs, she'll become paralyzed, and Sophia has basically put her life on hold to care for her mother. And they kind of make this last-ditch effort to figure out what's wrong with her mother's legs, and they go to Spain to a very strange doctor, hoping that this will give them some more insight into what's going on. So it is kind of about this fraught mother-daughter relationship, but it really is a character study of Sophia. She's simmering this entire book with rage, with resentment, with lust, with anger. And this book is a little bit messy. It's definitely complicated. And like I have a vlog coming out soon, my first reading vlog, and I talk about how this book is some of the best writing I've ever come across. It's absolutely hypnotizing. It pulls you in. The atmosphere is like unlike anything I've read. This book is messy. It does it all. I think it has kind of this through line of female rage and female sexuality, which are things that I love to read about. Sophia kind of talks about in the book how she's constantly made herself smaller and has taken up less space in the world for the advantage of others, and she's kind of sick of doing that, and you feel her simmering and you're just waiting for her to explode. On her mother, on the people around her, she gets into a few different relationships that are really messy and seem kind of manipulative as well, which is kind of what she's used to with her mother. So I would definitely recommend this. I'll read anything Levy writes. I'm completely on board. This book like blew my mind. It's one of my favorites I've read this whole year, maybe this past like 2 years since I've started reading. So, all right. And then a book that is very popular right now, and that is Detransition Baby by Torrey Peters. So again, I talked about this book in my Bar in the Bookcase tag, but I will quickly mention what it's about again. So we follow Reese, Ames, and Katrina. Reese and Ames are exes. Reese is a trans woman, and when Ames and Reese were together, Ames was living as a trans woman named Amy, and he detransitioned to live as a man, and a few years later got Katrina, his boss, pregnant when he didn't think that was possible. So that's kind of the jumping off point of the book, and each section is kind of titled 3 months post-conception, 8 years prior to conception, because conception is really the moment that changed all three of these people's lives. And because of this pregnancy, Ames kind of has to reveal himself to Katrina and tell her that he used to live as a transgender woman. And basically, he doesn't know if he can be a father in the traditional sense, but he believes he can be a parent if they were to invite Reese into this kind of parenting triad, because Reese understands all the complexities of queer parenting and queer identity. So they asked Reese to come in and become another mother to this child. And this Peters has said it many times, and it's definitely true that this book has like a no-holds-bar approach. It definitely doesn't stop to spell out things to the cis reader. If a cis reader wants to enjoy this book, you definitely have to do your own research, and I definitely did. There were a few things that I just had to Google, which I think is really great, and I definitely learned a lot. But I also think that this book, it was also really beautiful and moving, and it was sometimes heartbreaking, sometimes sexy, sometimes really, really upsetting. We also go back in time and follow Reese and Ames as young people, and as when they were a couple and when they were together, and you kind of learn all of the big messy history that they would be entering into parenting with, and kind of why it makes sense for them to become this parenting triad, and why it will be really challenging. But I think what this book kind of left me with is just kind of feeling so impressed that these three people were so willing to be vulnerable and to allow themselves to possibly be heartbroken to become parents. I think specifically Reese kind of goes through this in her mind of, you know, she's always wanted to be a mother, and she understands all the roadblocks that stand in her way as a trans woman, and that she kind of is really terrified of always being the odd one out in this parenting triad and not being seen as a legitimate mother equally to how Katrina will be seen. So I think just how these three people are all willing to put their hearts on the line to become parents, I think was so moving. But also this book has a lot going on. It's kind of like jam-packed and not so big of a book, but it takes you there with the characters. Like I said, there's no hold back. It's messy, it's heartbreaking, but I'm so glad I read it. And if you're going to like monetarily support any of the authors on the Women's Prize long list, I think this is the one to monetarily support and buy a copy of. Of course, I've also purchased Burnt Sugar and Piranesi, but if you're going to support one of those books, I think this is the one. I'm so glad I read it. I'm so glad it's getting all the recognition it's getting right now, because while it has all that other stuff going on and so many important conversations, it's also a really intense character study, which is what I love. I definitely recommend it. So those are all of the books I read in the second half of March. I had a great reading month. Thank you so much for watching. I think my first reading vlog should be coming up soon. So far it's going terribly. I just keep forgetting to film, but I am trying my best. So feel free to subscribe if you feel so inclined, and please comment below if you've read any of these or just your favorite book that you've read in the past month. I would love to hear, and thank you so much for watching. Bye everyone!